Good evening. We're back with another Marvel Champions video, and this evening will be a buyer guide aimed at newer players who have purchased the core set and are wondering where to go next. Currently it is September 11th, 2023. There are 6 expansions in the game, 5 scenario packs, and 29 hero packs. Probably most of the players are not going to buy all of the content in the game, and so you may be wondering which of the content is worth picking up and which you can safely ignore, and I'll give my recommendations. It will, of course, matter what your personal goals are for the game. Most players will likely fall into one of a few scenarios. A, you're looking to buy the content to play solo. B, you're looking to buy the content to play in a multiplayer game, and you will be purchasing all of the content, and then your friends will come over to your house and then you will play the game together. Or C, you're looking to play in a multiplayer game and each of the players will be buying their own content, so all you need to worry about is building maybe 1 or 2 or 3 different decks that you can bring to your multiplayer game. So I will give my recommendations about which of the expansions and hero packs to buy with an eye on these different scenarios. There will also be players who are playing seriously, and there will be players who are playing with an eye toward just fun or thematic decks, and we'll talk about those goals as well. Here are the 6 expansions that have currently been released in their release order. This is not the order that I would recommend buying them, and the reason is because the difficulty of the expansions can vary pretty wildly. The Rise of the Red Skull, the first expansion box released after the core set, is relatively mild in terms of its difficulty. It's followed by the Galaxy's Most Wanted, which is brutally difficult and widely considered the most difficult expansion box in the game. If you follow the release order, you may find that you may kill your enthusiasm for the game when you get to Galaxy's Most Wanted, and you may kill your multiplayer group's enthusiasm for the game if you buy the expansions in the release order. So I will give a different order which will increase the difficulty more gradually, ramping up to the Galaxy's Most Wanted, which I would recommend purchasing last. Each of the expansion boxes have different themes if you are concerned with theming. The Rise of the Red Skull has Spider-Woman and Hawkeye, and the heroes in that cycle are all Avengers. The Galaxy's Most Wanted expansion covers the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Mad Titan Shadow, I'm not sure that really has a theme. The heroes that were included in that cycle seem to be just whatever was left over from previous cycles. You've got Spectrum and Adam Warlock in the expansion. Adam Warlock, of course, being a Guardian and Spectrum being an Avenger. Then in that cycle you had Nebula, who's a Guardian. You had Vision, who's an Avenger. You have War Machine and Valkyrie, who are Avengers. So this expansion seems to consist of leftovers along with this cycle. There are some very good leadership cards in that box. Sinister Motives is the Web Warriors cycle. The 2 heroes are Ghost Spider and Miles Morales, and the hero packs bring the other Web Warriors from the first Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie into the game. Mutant Genesis is the X-Men cycle, and Next Evolution is the most recently released expansion box. We don't have any hero packs from this cycle yet, but the theme of this cycle is the X-Force heroes. Let's dive in and take a look at the order that I recommend buying the hero packs and expansion boxes. After the core set, the first 2 hero packs that I would recommend getting would be Captain America and Doctor Strange, followed by the Green Goblin scenario pack. If you're playing solo, this will give you some excellent options for diversity of heroes, so you have some variety in your collection. And if you're playing multiplayer, well, the best possible hero combination that you were probably playing if you had the core set alone would be Iron Man, Captain Marvel, and then Black Panther, and probably Spider-Man, leaving out She-Hulk, who is the weakest of the heroes in my opinion in the core set. If you add in Doctor Strange and Captain America, then the best possible multiplayer combination will be Doctor Strange, Captain America, Iron Man, and Captain Marvel, which is quite strong and should leave you capable of defeating the core box on expert difficulty and the Green Goblin scenario pack on expert difficulty. After picking up these hero packs and this scenario pack, you can jump into the first expansion that was released after the core set, which is The Rise of the Red Skull. The Rise of the Red Skull villains are Crossbones, Absorbing Man, Taskmaster, Arnim Zola, and Red Skull. And the theme of the expansion box and the hero pack cycle in terms of player cards is Avengers. Rise of the Red Skull was the first box released after the core set, and it's a gentle step up in difficulty. If you have picked up Captain America and Doctor Strange, you should have no trouble defeating this content on expert difficulty. It's a great expansion box, and I recommend it. After the Rise of the Red Skull, the hero packs I would recommend are Ant-Man and the Scarlet Witch. Ant-Man's a very strong hero, and the Scarlet Witch is strong and also quite fun. These 4 hero packs that I've recommended so far are what I would consider the marquee heroes from the Avengers cycle, at least the marquee heroes that are also pretty good in the game. Ant-Man at this point in your collection will be a upgrade over Iron Man. Most likely Iron Man doesn't really come into his own until you have a full slate of protection tech upgrades available. So the best possible team will be Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Captain America, and Captain Marvel, in my opinion, with Scarlet Witch there for variety. After these 2 hero packs, I would recommend moving to the Mad Titans Shadow expansion. The Mad Titans Shadow expansion is another gentle difficulty step up from the Rise of the Red Skull. This is differing from the release order of the expansions, which would have Galaxy's Most Wanted second. Galaxy's Most Wanted is a brutal step up in difficulty from the Rise of the Red Skull. I would say a near impossible step up in difficulty from the Rise of the Red Skull. When I was doing my progression series, I don't think I was able to beat Ronan the Accuser, the Galaxy's Most Wanted final boss, for quite some time. In addition, the Mad Titans Shadow makes sense thematically to come after the Rise of the Red Skull, because the Rise of the Red Skull cycle was all about Avengers, and the Mad Titans Shadow expansion has you fighting Avengers enemies. You have Ebony Maw, Proxima Midnight, and Corvus Glaive, and then you have Thanos, Hela, and Loki. It makes sense to me thematically to move from the Rise of the Red Skull with the Avengers into the Mad Titan Shadow. You'll complete your Avengers collection or close to it with Spectrum if you've been buying all the hero packs. There's also a few that come after the Mad Titan Shadow expansion box in War Machine and Vision and Valkyrie. But we buy the expansions in this way, or I recommend buying the expansions in this way, to avoid the brutal difficulty of the Galaxy's Most Wanted at this time. Because what may happen if you move from the Rise of the Red Skull to the Galaxy's Most Wanted is you'll destroy your enthusiasm for the game, or possibly your multiplayer group's enthusiasm for the game. That's how brutal the difficulty of the Galaxy's Most Wanted expansion is. And it's brutal in a way that feels unfun, because it severely limits what the players can do. It doesn't feel like playing a powerful hero against powerful villains. It feels like playing against mid-tier villains, and you're playing as a powerful hero who's had one of their legs chopped off. So it's not, I would say, much fun on a limited collection, and is therefore not the expansion I would recommend after the Rise of the Red Skull. I would recommend moving into the Mad Titan's Shadow instead. There aren't any hero packs from the Mad Titan Shadow cycle that I would really recommend. And I will say at this point in the game, there will be 4 expansion boxes after this. I cannot guarantee that you will be able to defeat all of them on expert difficulty unless you buy one of the 4 best heroes in the game and build them out fully with the best deck that you can make for them, at least in solo play. It's my opinion that you're going to need one of those 4 heroes, and you're going to need a full deck behind them in order to defeat all of the content in the game. Otherwise, you will struggle with the final boss of Mutant Genesis. You'll struggle with the final boss of Sinister Motives. You may struggle with 1 or 2 of the bosses in Next Evolution, and you'll struggle with the entire Galaxy's Most Wanted expansion, excepting the first villain. So we'll go over what I consider to be the 4 best heroes in the game, look at their decks, and look at what expansions and hero packs you'd need to buy to build them out. Now, if you want to proceed and continue with the expansions without buying any of these heroes, if you're playing multiplayer, you may be okay. Or if you only aim to play on normal difficulty, you may be okay. You may not need to buy all 4 of the heroes, maybe just 1 or 2 of them for your multiplayer group, and then you can get by with what you already have. Or maybe you don't need any of them. My primary experience with this game is in solo, and that's what my recommendations are oriented around. But in solo, the next expansion that I'm going to recommend is Mutant Genesis. You can get by that one with a lot of heroes. The one after that, Sinister Motives, Venom Goblin is a brutal difficulty hero, and there are not very many, or brutal difficulty villain, and there are not very many heroes in the game that are capable of taking on Venom Goblin, and certainly not Ronan the Accuser, who's the final boss of the Galaxy's Most Wanted. So we'll take a look here at what I consider to be the 4 best heroes in the game. Take a look at a deck that you can build for them, which I have used in videos on my channel to defeat the 3 most difficult villains in the game on expert difficulty. Each of these 4 heroes will have done that. And then we'll continue with the expansion recommendations once we got you squared away with heroes that are capable of defeating the expansions that will come after the Rise of the Red Skull and the Mad Titan's Shadow. The first of the heroes that I would recommend is Spider-Ham, Peter Porker. I would recommend a leadership deck for Spider-Ham. In the deck, it requires 10 packs, or rather the core set, 2 expansion boxes, and 7 hero packs in order to fully build this deck. You can get by without using some of these cards, but clarity of purpose is absolutely essential. Spider-Ham is the hero that I would consider to be the best hero in the game. If you are looking to join a multiplayer group and nobody is running Spider-Ham generally, and you just want to join with one deck that can dominate and or carry in almost any scenario, this would be the one to build. Spider-Ham is ridiculously good. Here are the expansion boxes and the hero packs that will be needed to fully build this deck. Mad Titan, Shadow, Sinister Motives, Black Widow, Wasp, Drax, Vision, SPDR, and Cyclops. Next up we have Ironheart, and I recommend a Justice Ironheart deck. The reason for the Justice recommendation is the card One Way or Another, which reveals a side scheme in order to draw 3 cards. Ironheart has a very, very strong late game, but a relatively weak early game when she only has a hand size of 4 until you get her upgrades rolling. One Way or Another helps to compensate for that by drawing cards and Flyover, which removes 3 threat and gives you 2 progress counters for Ironheart can help you to compensate for the side schemes that will be coming into play. Ironheart's very, very strong. Used her on videos on my channel to defeat all of the most difficult heroes in the game, as well as, although I don't have it on the channel, I also used her to defeat the new Next Evolution expansion box on expert difficulty. To build this Ironheart deck will require the following expansions: Rise of the Red Skull, Mad Titan Shadow, Sinister Motives, and the Black Widow, Ant-Man, Scarlet Witch, Nebula, Vision, and Nova hero packs. Now you'll note with each of these 4 decks that I'm recommending, they include hero packs, which I don't necessarily recommend for the hero, and that's a bummer. It's kind of a bummer to buy hero packs just because you need one of the cards that comes with the hero, but not really be interested in the hero itself. It can't be helped if you want to build a really elite deck. Any of the elite decks are going to include cards which come in hero packs that you may not necessarily want for the hero cards. Probably that was done intentionally, spreading out the cards. It's understandable though, card games always tend to be more on the expensive side as far as hobbies go, and relatively speaking, Marvel Champions is certainly cheaper than something like Magic the Gathering or Star Wars CCG, which I used to play back in the day. So it is what it is. To build one of the elite decks, you're going to need to get some of the hero packs that you may not be interested in for the heroes alone. But it can't be helped. Let's take a look at the third hero, the third elite hero that I would recommend, which is Doctor Strange. My opinion is that Aggression Doctor Strange based around Dive Bomb is the best possible Doctor Strange deck. We use Honed Technique and Dive Bomb in order to give big bursts of damage, which otherwise Doctor Strange kind of struggles with because he does have Bands of Sidorak, but Magic Blast doesn't really provide burst damage. We need burst damage to get around the Retaliate, though Bands of Sidorak doesn't count as an attack and therefore doesn't proc Retaliate. But if you're using Bands of Sidorak along with Master of the Mystic Arts, it tends to be a little bit inefficient in terms of resources. And I find that Dive Bomb Honed Technique gets the job done better than, for example, a Leadership Doctor Strange deck. In addition, if you're trying to build the best possible multiplayer team, you don't really want to have 3 heroes going leadership. So my recommendation for the top 4 heroes in the game include 2 leadership heroes, 1 aggression hero, and 1 justice hero for a fairly balanced team. And any of these heroes and decks in solo play will also be capable of taking on any scenario in the game. To build out Doctor Strange, we will need the following expansions and hero packs: Rise of the Red Skull, Mad Titan Shadow, Sinister Motives, and then the hero packs Hulk, Wasp, Scarlet Witch, Star-Lord, Valkyrie, Nova, and Wolverine. Once again, you'll note that some of these hero packs are not necessarily ones that you'd want to buy for the heroes. Hulk and Valkyrie are 2 of the worst heroes in the game, but unfortunately they have aggression aspect cards that you'll want if you intend to build an elite deck. And Doctor Strange certainly is an elite deck. Many players feel that he is the most powerful hero in the game, with some players actually disliking him because they feel he is too powerful and makes the game too easy. My feeling is if you find the game too easy with Doctor Strange, well, you can increase the difficulty to Heroic 1 or even Heroic 2, and then you will not find the game easy anymore. There's no doubt, though, he is very, very strong. Arguably the number 1 hero, though I feel that place goes to Spider-Ham, with Doctor Strange coming in at number 2. And Ironheart I would rank at number 4 behind the final hero that I'm going to recommend, which is Star-Lord. Star-Lord is an absolute beast in solo play, but not a hero that I would recommend bringing to a multiplayer game without the consent of the other players, because Star-Lord's whole thing is bringing a lot of encounter cards into the game, and then he uses his cards to gain additional damage or additional card draw or additional threat removal based on the number of encounter cards that he has in front of him. However, if you're playing in a multiplayer game, that can mean that Star-Lord ends up creating problems that the other players then need to deal with, and not every team may be on board for that. So I wouldn't necessarily bring Star-Lord to a game without consulting your team first. If you want a hero that no one's really going to object to, it would be Spider-Ham, Doctor Strange, or Ironheart, though some teams might feel it's in bad form to bring Spider-Ham or Doctor Strange because it makes the difficulty too easy. Though I would say that you can always increase the difficulty if you find that to be a problem. To build out Star-Lord, I do recommend a Leadership Star-Lord deck. It would be the second of the top 4 heroes who I would recommend a Leadership deck for. However, Star-Lord's deck is going to be focused around the Guardians of the Galaxy, whereas Spider-Ham's deck is going to be focused around the Web Warriors. Here are the expansions and hero packs needed to build out this Star-Lord deck. He's one of the more affordable elite heroes, I would say. Galaxy's Most Wanted, Mad Titan Shadow, and then Venom, Cyclops, Captain America, Black Widow, Ant-Man, Wasp, Drax, and War Machine. So it only requires 2 expansions instead of 3. Does that result in less money? It actually might not. They may actually all be relatively similar. Star-Lord unfortunately requires you to buy the Galaxy's Most Wanted to get a couple of the allies that we use in the deck, and that may not be an expansion you want to get until the end. War Machine and Drax also pretty lackluster heroes, but we need cards from those hero packs. So once you've gotten the Rise of the Red Skull and the Mad Titan Shadow expansions, particularly if you're playing solo, I would then recommend that you buy one of the elite heroes and build out their deck. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee that you will be able to beat all of the future content on expert difficulty. You may struggle with the final boss of Mutant Genesis. You may struggle with the final boss of Sinister Motives. You may struggle with 1 or 2 of the bosses in Next Evolution. You may struggle with most of the bosses in Galaxy's Most Wanted if you don't have an elite deck. If you're in multiplayer, you can get away with it. If you're playing multiplayer, you could simply continue to follow this guide and you may do very well, even on expert difficulty. You may not. You may find that you need some of the elite heroes. The next expansion that I recommend picking up after the Mad Titan Shadow is Mutant Genesis. Mutant Genesis is the X-Men expansion. Mutant Genesis would normally come in the release order after Sinister Motives. In my opinion, it is an easier expansion than Sinister Motives, and therefore a good next step from the Mad Titan's Shadow. The final boss of the Mutant Genesis expansion, Magneto, is one of the 3 most difficult heroes in the game, or 3 most difficult villains in the game. Those 3 being Magneto, Venom Goblin, and Ronan the Accuser. In order to beat Magneto, you need a very good deck. Now, he's probably the easiest of the 3 most difficult heroes, but he is still very, very difficult. The other villains of the Mutant Genesis expansion are Sabretooth, Sentinel, Master, and Master Mold, along with a Sinister Six scenario which has multiple villains. The difficulties they bring are Sabretooth has Retaliate, Sentinel and Master Mold have Stalwart, which means they are immune to stun and confuse. Magneto has Steady. Magneto also brings extra cards in, and he can gain an attachment that gives him Retaliate. The Magneto scenario requires a lot of thwarting. My opinion is that it's a good next step from Mad Titan Shadow. And the X-Men cycle is a lot of fun. It's very multiplayer focused. Very, very multiplayer focused to a fault. with one of the heroes from the cycle, Rogue. She's partly non-functional in solo play. As a solo play, right around the time of the Mutant Genesis expansion, solo play seemed to become even more of an afterthought than it previously had been. So this is a very difficult game in solo play. After the Mutant Genesis expansion, the only hero pack that I recommend for solo players from Mutant Genesis is Wolverine, unless you are building out a specific deck, though I would give honorable mention to Gambit, who's a lot of fun, but isn't that strong in multiplayer, or in solo. I think I gave him like an A rating in solo. Wolverine's really, really good. He's strong. He's a marquee hero. Everybody knows Wolverine. And there may be other hero packs in the Mutant Genesis cycle that you need to pick up if you're building out a specific deck. Beast in particular is a very good leadership ally, and he comes from the Cyclops hero pack. But Wolverine is the only one that I really recommend for solo players for the hero alone, though Gambit certainly deserves honorable mention. And in terms of theming, a lot of the X-Men are a lot of fun. So if theming is what you're concerned with, I would definitely take a look at the X-Men cycle, especially if you're playing a multiplayer game. An X-Men team can be a lot of fun, and some of the X-Men heroes, such as Storm, get a lot better in a multiplayer game and more interesting, or Cyclops or Rogue. They all get much better in a multiplayer game. And so if you are running a multiplayer game, I would take a look at more than just Wolverine from the Mutant Genesis cycle. But if you're playing solo, just Wolverine and then whatever other hero packs you need in order to build out the deck of your choice. After Mutant Genesis, I recommend moving on to Sinister Motives, which is the Web Warriors cycle. Sinister Motives, the final boss is Venom Goblin, who is a very, very difficult villain in solo play. Very few heroes are able to defeat Venom Goblin on expert difficulty in true solo. You'll need one of the 4 elite heroes in order to do that reliably. However, Sinister Motives is an excellent cycle for its theme. The Web Warriors are a lot of fun. I absolutely loved the Into the Spider-Verse movie, so I loved the Sinister Motives expansion. Ghost Spider is great. Miles Morales is great. The Web Warriors synergy is great. One of the strongest synergies in the game. Like this expansion a lot. It's very difficult, which is why I put it 4th in the order that I would buy the expansions. But it is a very, very good expansion. And after Sinister Motives, the hero packs from this cycle that I recommend are Ironheart and Spider-Ham, both of which we have discussed previously as being elite heroes. I would buy them after Sinister Motives only if you are not that concerned with buying content before you buy Mutant Genesis, so that you can ensure that you can beat all of the content. If you haven't already, pick up Ironheart and Spider-Ham, as they are really, really good heroes and really fun heroes to play. In particular, Ironheart, who is one of my favorites. You don't really run into any problems with her where people complain that she's too good, though she is very, very good, particularly the Justice deck that I recommended. So if you haven't already, pick up Ironheart and Spider-Ham. And then move on to the most recently released expansion, which is Next Evolution. Now, Next Evolution, in terms of its difficulty, the first 2 scenarios I found very, very easy. Juggernaut I did not find easy at all. Now, Juggernaut is manageable if you keep his helmet flipped. He has a mechanic where if you don't have his helmet flipped, he builds up momentum counters. All of his attacks have overkill, and overkill is a brutal mechanic to deal with. And Juggernaut can be a really big problem. To flip his helmet, you need to spend 3 resources. Spending 3 resources is not something that every hero can do. You need to spend 3 resources, and you need to spend 3 resources of the same type. So let's say you're playing in true solo, and you're bringing in a hand size 4 hero. Is that going to be easy to find 3 resources of the same type in order to flip Juggernaut's helmet? Well, if you don't flip Juggernaut's helmet within 2 or 3 turns in solo, you will be dead. And that's going to be tough to do with a hand size 4 hero. In addition, the hero or the villains in Next Evolution. Mr. Sinister has Overkill, Retaliate, and or Steady based on what superpower he's been given. Random chance decides that, and a little bit of your play. And then the final villain, Strife, requires a lot of thwarting and requires you to spend extra resources. Cable is very good at thwarting. Cable is one of the heroes that's included in Next Evolution, and this challenge is probably oriented around him. I found the villains of Next Evolution quite challenging. Now, in terms of ranking it, would I rank it as more difficult than Sinister Motives? I'd probably say it's roughly equivalent. Maybe as you could argue it's between Mutant Genesis and Sinister Motives, but I recommend it after Mutant Genesis and Sinister Motives because it's the most recently released expansion and we don't have any hero packs from the expansion yet, so we can't really play the heroes that are included, Cable or Domino, the way that they were likely, I would say, designed to be played, because they were probably play tested using all of the cards from the cycle. Domino and Cable are X Factor heroes, and we've got more X Factor heroes and more X Factor cards to come. So we can't really play them the way they were, quote unquote, designed to be played at this moment, which is why I'm recommending Next Evolution 5th in the buying order at this moment in time. Now, where will it land when all is said and done? Well, when all is said and done, then we'll have a real idea of where the difficulty's at, because we'll have access to all of the cards from this cycle. As of right now, my recommendation is 5th, and in terms of difficulty, I'd rank it as maybe a little bit easier than Sinister Motives, maybe somewhere between Mutant Genesis and Sinister Motives in difficulty. And that brings us to the end game of Marvel Champions, the final expansion that I'd recommend getting. The final boss for your collection, which is the Galaxy's Most Wanted, an expansion which had a campaign that was flat out broken on release. I would argue that it's still pretty broken. Broken in terms of meaning that its difficulty was so intense that it just wasn't possible to beat it using cards that were currently available. I would argue that you still need a very advanced collection to even come close to beating this expansion on expert difficulty if you're playing in campaign mode as it was originally designed. The developers later errated one of the cards for Ronan the Accuser to try to make him easier. They made the card optional, one of the campaign cards. And after the Galaxy's Most Wanted expansion, the hero packs that I think are very good and worth getting from the Galaxy's Most Wanted cycle are Star-Lord, who's my favorite hero in the game, and Venom, who is also a lot of fun. I did a video once on control meta versus combo meta in card games. Control meta meaning a metagame in which you limit what other players can do. Combo meta meaning the game is focused around combos giving you greater and greater amounts of power, and whoever gets the highest combo wins. Some players prefer control meta, some players prefer combo meta. I would wholeheartedly recommend Galaxy's Most Wanted if you like it when a control meta is used against you, not like when you like using a control meta. Lots of players like that. But when you like it when another player controls you or limits what you can do, because that's what Galaxy's Most Wanted is trying to do to players. It's trying to limit what you can do by forcing you to spend resources on different obstacles. And there are other ways that it tries to really limit what the players can do, and this results in a very frustrating and very, very difficult expansion. And even though it was the second expansion released, I recommend that you buy it last. And if you listened to this video and said, you know what, I don't really think I want to buy it at all, well, I wouldn't blame you whatsoever. And I would caution you that if you ignore this guide and you decide to buy the Galaxy's Most Wanted right after the Red Skull, as that is the release order, you run a very real risk of destroying your enthusiasm for the game and or your multiplayer group's enthusiasm for the game. When I was doing my progression series, I nearly found my enthusiasm for the game destroyed by this expansion. I saw other players who played Marvel Champions on YouTube. I saw their enthusiasm for the game destroyed by Galaxy's Most Wanted. So buyer beware, and it's not one that I would recommend until your collection is quite advanced, lest you find you no longer want to play after experiencing this expansion. Now, you may recall that at the top of the video I mentioned scenario packs, and you may be wondering when I would recommend picking up those, or if I would recommend picking up those. Here are the 4 scenario packs that we have not previously talked about. I already recommended the Green Goblin scenario pack before picking up Rise of the Red Skull expansion box. Wrecking Crew, honestly, you can forget about that one. Most of the opinions that I've seen are that Wrecking Crew is not that good. I think I played it once. It requires a lot of setup. The difficulty is very low. That is not one that I would recommend. The Once and Future Kang, pretty good scenario pack for a multiplayer group. For a solo group, or for a solo player, maybe not as much. Seems like a lot of fun to play in a multiplayer group. The Hood and Mojo Mania, pretty good, pretty unique scenario packs. I would consider these scenario packs as extras to buy if you've purchased the expansions and you still want additional content and you've still got additional money to spend. Okay, then go ahead and pick up these scenario packs. I wouldn't include any of the must-buys, and you can easily leave out Wrecking Crew or buy it last, only after you're yearning for more Marvel Champions content to play. But these scenario packs, they're decent extras after you've gone through the campaigns, the expansion boxes, because each of the expansion boxes has a full campaign included, and the scenario packs are not part of any campaign. I would consider them fun extras or kind of novel extras. None of them are particularly difficult. Wrecking Crew is downright easy. So I consider these as content to buy after you've picked up the expansions and you still want more villain content, and worth noting that none of these scenario packs contain any player cards. So don't buy them hoping for any heroes or aspect or basic cards, because they don't have any. They are villain content only. So that's my recommendation for the order in which to buy the expansions and the hero packs that are worth buying from each cycle, though not necessarily the order that you want to buy the hero packs, depending on what your goals are in the game. If you would like to be able to defeat all of the content on expert difficulty, then you will need to pick up one of the 4 elite heroes. If you're playing solo, you'll need to pick up one of the 4 elite heroes before you dive into Mutant Genesis. Arguably, you could get away with some lesser heroes in Mutant Genesis if you want to play through that on expert with like Captain America or something like that, or an Ant-Man. But by the time you get to Sinister Motives, you'll need an elite hero in order to beat Venom Goblin on expert difficulty. If you're playing in multiplayer, you can get away with something less. You don't have to play a team of Spider-Ham, Star-Lord, Ironheart, and Doctor Strange, though you certainly aren't going to struggle with anything if you do play that team. So it depends on what your goals are. If your multiplayer group's goal is to play the game on as high a difficulty as you possibly can, that's the team I'd recommend. If your goals are more thematic oriented, or if you want to compromise between playing on the highest difficulty possible and playing heroes that you really want to play, then you can include some combination of the best heroes in the game and more thematic heroes and see what works for your group. If you're a solo player, though, you're going to need one of those 4 heroes if you want to beat everything on expert, because this is a brutally difficult game. So the order in which you buy the hero packs is going to vary wildly based on which heroes you're trying to build out with and based on what your goals are. But this is the order that I would recommend buying the expansions in. In particular, Galaxy's Most Wanted last, because of its brutal difficulty, and I would just reiterate a final warning that if you ignore this guide and buy Galaxy's Most Wanted second, which was its release order, you may kill your enthusiasm for the game as well as your multiplayer group's enthusiasm for the game, as my enthusiasm for the game was nearly destroyed by Galaxy's Most Wanted in my progression series, and I witnessed that with other players who played on YouTube having their enthusiasm destroyed by Galaxy's Most Wanted. It's a brutal, brutal expansion, and I would recommend getting that last if you get it at all. Next Evolution is very good though. It's a lot of fun. Cable and Domino are great. The first two scenarios are quite easy. The others are difficult, but they never feel brutal or unfair. I like that expansion a lot. So that's my buying guide for Marvel Champions. Feel free to shoot me any questions that you have in the YouTube comments section, and I will get to them if I can. And thank you for watching.